2, 2. Hello, check. Hello, Chad. Are you there? Are you with me? What's up? How's it going? How are we doing? How are we doing? How are you? Closing some windows here. GM Gamers, hello. Oh, I'm here again, folks. Right on time. Monday. It's Monday. It's a classic Monday stream. And I'm happy to be here right on time, as usual, on my regular stream that I do every single day. Good morning from Seattle, aka the Amazon. Good morning to you. Fake news, it's Wednesday. Okay, fine. 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 I admit it. I admit that it's Wednesday. Already happy? Anyway, we are back. We're so back. The needle has swung from it's so over to we're so back. It's swung back again.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Time dilation is a motherfucker. That's right. I agree. Critical mass.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Funwave TRRS Friendship Triangle.
Waldo's, thank you for the 31 months of Prime, and thank you Bon Bon as well for the 37 months. Thank you to you both. Happy to have you. Happy to be back. Listen, I know it's been probably since June that I've been saying like, oh, the stream is gonna be more sporadic, and we're gonna get back to a regular schedule. And it's now almost October. The school's been happening for like almost a month, and still working on it. I'm still working on it. Like I've been saying, I have been spending a little bit less time in Montreal. I haven't always been at my apartment, and I haven't had a way to do the stream like in a mobile situation as of yet. But I did just get a laptop. I was mentioning this last week. So I am trying to set up a mobile stream situation. So if a situation occurs where I'm not here, we'll try to still be regularly doing the show, as I've continually promised you and I've continually failed to live up to. It's not the fake Rob. No, it's not. I'm noticing this is a weird look for me. My hair is getting long. My facial hair is getting kind of out of control. I do feel like I look like I'm a person in disguise right now. Maybe I'm just dissociating yet again. It's probably more likely the second one.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
More like bozos, haha.
Franz, thank you for the 27 months of Prime. I appreciate it. Setting up the mobile Bloomberg terminal. That's right. I'm transitioning to become one of those guys now. No, I'm getting set up so I can do the stream from elsewhere if I need to. Like I said, I've been spending a little bit of time elsewhere lately. I've been spending a bit of time in Toronto over the last couple of weeks. I was in Toronto earlier this week, and I had quite a day yesterday. As you know, I have this new car. It's not a new car. It's a used car. It's a 10-year-old Subaru Impreza. So far has been fantastic. It was a great purchase at a good price. Passed an inspection, everything good. And I did drive it to Toronto this weekend. Drove around all weekend. No problem. Totally fine. I was on my way back yesterday doing the 5.5 hour drive back to Montreal. And I was going to go and pick up my kid and like bring him over to my place, which I was quite looking forward to because I miss him. And I left Toronto and I needed to stop for gas. I drove for about 20-30 minutes and then I was okay, I'm going to stop for gas and then do the remaining stretch there. So I stopped for gas in Whitby at some random station in Whitby. I was getting a little low, so I couldn't make it to the en route or anything like that. I stopped for gas in Whitby, filled up, and I said, okay, I got about 5 hours to go. I got my audio book queued up. I'm ready to do this. And I go to start the car, and nothing happens. Nothing happens. All the lights turned on, and the radio turned on, and all the electronics turned on, but I didn't even get no engine sound whatsoever. And I'm just sitting there in my car. I'm all ready to go, right? I'm just ready to go. I was here. I've got my 5 hour stretch. I'm good to go. I'm filled up on gas. And nothing. Nothing. So, obviously wasn't very happy about that development. I called CAA because I was like, well, maybe it's a battery thing. You know, it could be like a battery situation. The hidden costs of used cars is springing up quickly. It's weird because I brought it for an inspection, Kijiji. I brought it for an inspection before I bought it because I wanted to be like responsible. I brought it to this garage that I really trust and they took a look at it. They're like, no, this seems like really good. They took a look at it, you know. I guess there's certain things you can't really predict. You know, you can see if like the suspension is good, if the engine is good, right? If the transmission is okay, if the brakes are okay, you can check. But all those things, there are certain things that you cannot predict. I'm learning now. And one of those things is the starter. And when the starter of the car dies, it just dies. And there's nothing really you can do about that. It's not even like a used car thing. It's like I don't even think the guy that I bought the car from was aware of that. I don't think that's something that you can be aware of. But that's it. The starter was fucked up. So I thought maybe it was a battery thing. I called CAA. CAA came to I had to wait like 30 minutes. CAA came, the battery person, to like give that a boost and like check if that was the problem. And then you have that moment of hope. They connect the battery things. It's like, okay, now it's going to start. Now it's going to be fine. Still nothing. No sound whatsoever. So I had to wait another 30 minutes or whatever for a tow truck to come. I had to get the car towed from this gas station in Whitby at like 5 o'clock. So I managed to find a garage pretty close by that wasn't closed till 6. I got the car towed to this garage. I got there at like 5:15. And they were like, it's really, like they checked and they're like, yeah, it's the starter. And you know what? It's really unlikely that we're going to be able to get you anything tonight. And I was like, wonderful. Good. And these guys managed to pull off this miracle and get a new starter delivered to the place and installed. And I was actually able to resume my trip and I did not have to stay there. But I was sad also because I was supposed to go pick up my kid and then I was too late and he was upset. He was waiting for me to come pick him up and he was really upset that I wasn't able to do that. I was very upset because I miss him and that's like a important responsibility for me to always be there when I say I'm going to be there. You know, that's not something that I want to start fucking around with. So I was not particularly happy about it. I did get back on the road though. I got in at like 11, so it wasn't like too late. But it was quite an adventure. It was a pretty big adventure yesterday, taking care of all that. And yeah, I hit an unexpected cost. You know, it wasn't like totally backbreaking, but it was still not very good. And that's what happened. That was my day yesterday. So I am glad that I am actually able to be back here now and doing the show when I said I was going to on Wednesday. And now that should be sorted out. Like, I think the car is in pretty good shape. The starter thing was unfortunate. I think it's in pretty good shape now. I am setting up a sort of secondary stream setup, so if a time does come, and a time probably will come when I'm like not here in my office, I can still do the show, or at least log in and check in for 2-3 hours, you know? So that's all. That's what's going on. That's my big update. I'm just hoping that there's no more issues with this car. I think it was a really good purchase. I really like driving it so far. I drove it to Toronto, no issues at all. Drove it around, no problem at all. I really like it. I'm hoping that there's no more issues with it. Otherwise, I had a really nice weekend. Look at the city slicker over here. That's me. Yeah. No, and I had a really nice weekend. I've been kind of logged off lately. I've been logged off. I've been unplugged. I've still been doing this show, obviously, in the podcast, because that's like work. It's work for me. And I enjoy doing it, chat. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy coming on here and hanging out with you every day. But I have just been kind of logged off lately. Not really a lot to look at, thankfully. Well, listen, I've been paying attention to what's been going on. When I say I've logged off, I don't mean that I'm sticking my head in the sand and I'm not paying attention to anything that's happening. I am, obviously. That's something that I'm still thinking about and looking at and talking about, but it's just like I just haven't felt like I've had a whole lot to say. Part of it has just been kind of out of necessity, I think, for me. Like, it's been years now that I've just been immersed in the daily discourse of everything, and I think taking a step back from that has been somewhat necessary for a number of reasons. I don't know, it's hard to tweet right now, I find, not only am I, it's just like, what can you say, you know what I mean? I want to tweet dumb shit. I wanted to do a tweet about how I think it's totally okay and fine and normal to listen to Enya. I think that's okay. I think maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have thought that was lame and uncool. I don't think it is lame and uncool to listen to Enya. I think Enya is really a talented artist with some really great production, some really great songwriting on all those big songs. I think she's got some really good songs, and it's nice sometimes to just sit back and enjoy that. And just not be worried about what that means, and whether it means you're old or whether it means you're uncool. The wisdom 40 years brings, exactly, that's right. But at the same time, it's just I don't want to tweet about this dumb, banal shit. And then if I'm just tweeting about the new, what am I supposed to say? What are we supposed to say? It's I want to just log in and just say and I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't tweet this and I wouldn't say it here on Twitch, but I want to just log in and say death to Israel. And obviously I'm not going to tweet that. I'm certainly not going to say on here on twitch.tv, death to Israel, because I think that's something that you can get in trouble for. But it's just what are you supposed to say? You know what I mean? It's do you tweet about dumb bullshit about your life? Are we just going to what more is there to talk about? I don't know. It's just, I'm totally just perplexed by how we're supposed to engage with any of this anymore. Number one, Enya is good actually to make Israel was real. These are the two main takeaways I think you should be having right now. I would never advocate for the destruction of the state of Israel. Me neither. I don't think it would be good to do that on here or any other platform. No matter what horrible crimes Israel's participating in, with the full support of the United States and Canada. I wouldn't come on here and advocate for that. And neither should you, chat. Jesus. Look, as soon as I say it, look who shows up. Anyway, and I'm not even saying, oh, it's over. What is there to say? We've said everything that we have to say. I don't really believe that. I guess I'm just like at a loss lately. I'm just like at a little bit of a loss. That's all. I'm not saying like we shouldn't talk about it anymore. I'm really not. I'm not suggesting that. I think we should continue to talk about it. I guess I personally feel I'm finding it difficult to weigh in on any of this stuff. Noise gate caught like half of that. That was very loud. That was really, really loud. Anyway, we're still doing this show. I mean, we're going to talk about this today. We're going to talk about this like escalating war in Lebanon today. We're going to talk about all this stuff. Like I'm not sitting here and saying like let's just like forget any of this is going on. Let's stick our heads in the sand. I'm not at all saying that. That's always why I've enjoyed kind of being able to do this show, because it's like you can come on and speak about things with like nuance, and you can have conversations, and it's not just about firing off whatever hot take or whatever it is you want to do. Not that I'm not guilty of that myself, and I'm sure I will get back to it at some point, but I've been very logged off when it comes to Twitter, especially. For this and for a variety of reasons. Hot dog talk is back, baby. I am planning on a couple of cool things for the show coming up, though. I just need to schedule this stuff, but I got a couple of really cool guests getting lined up here. I got Ben Clarkson and Matt Bors, authors of Justice Warriors. They're releasing a new version of that. A new updated, is it a sequel?
You can count on
Vote
me.
Harder.
You're gonna have good old
Justice
Rob
Warriors
to,
Vote
talk
Harder.
through all this.
Hello Malakas. TRRS Sankara.
Justice Warriors Vote Harder. Authors Ben Clarkson and Matt Bors. I'm booking them coming up. That'll be cool. Dimitri, thanks so much. Hello, Malaka. Thanks for the 28 months, and thanks for everything, Dimitri. I appreciate it. Also, someone that I've been talking to and someone that I actually hung out with in Toronto on Friday. I went to see the National actually on Friday, which was really cool and fun and something that I enjoyed a lot. And afterwards, I went out to a bar in Toronto, in Kensington
You can
area.
count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Hello Rob Rousseau.
Hello, Stone Corbell. Thanks for the 12 months. That's one entire year for you, Stone Corbell. Thank you for that. Thank you for the 12 months. I appreciate it. You got the 1 year sub badge now. Did they play Lemon World? I'm not really a National super fan. I know a bunch of their songs, and they played a lot of really good songs. It was a really great show. I'm not a huge super fan, though. I don't know all the songs. Ben Clarkson also did the absolutely amazing Blowback animated trailers. Very talented guy. I talked to Ben and Matt on the show, a year or so ago. I hung out with Ben a couple months ago at a Palestine rally. Really cool guy. And so after I saw the National on Friday, I went to a bar in Toronto and I met with Alex, aka House of Decline. And we got to talking. A bit. Alex is, I think, interested. She's interested in getting into like the like streaming space a little bit. And I said, hey, why don't you come onto my show and have a little chat with me? Maybe do some drawing stuff, something cool and fun. Getting into the streaming game. And for whatever reason, I was like, do not do that. Please, spare yourself. Do not do it. So I'm going to book something with her coming up as well with House of Decline, some kind of like live drawing, chit-chatting thing. That will be fun. Those are two big interviews, a couple big guests coming up. More sirens coming by. Greetings, Husker. Hello. It's nice to see you. Getting into visual arts this season. I guess so, yeah. I guess. I mean, it's not something that I'm very good at. Personally. But I do enjoy speaking with people that are part of that world as well. And I like all these folks, and it will be cool to be able to have them come on. You need to learn so you can properly parent little Rob. Well, I do a lot of drawings with him. I do a lot of drawings. I don't pretend to be very good. I like my drawings that I do with him. Sometimes he demands that I do these drawings, and I try to live up to that. You know? I do my best. I don't think that's like somewhere I'm particularly planning on, you know, getting better at. I think I'm too old to really improve a lot in that. Jeez, what the hell's going on in the city today? Do you want your son to look up to you or not? Well, he does look up to me. He does look up to me. He likes my drawings, even if they're crappy. All right, he likes them. I'm gonna go pick him up later today. I really miss him. I was really disappointed that I was not able to see him last night. Like I said, that's something that I really try to be consistent at, to be there when I say I'm going to be there, and I was really kind of upset last night when I couldn't because of this whole like car situation, which hopefully is dealt with now, but I am going to be picking him up later, so I'm looking forward to having him over because, you know, I love him a lot. He put my drawings right on the fridge. I've done a number of very cool drawings, okay? Very mad at something I saw on twitter.gov yesterday. Well, I've been mad at a whole bunch of stuff, Husker. What are you talking about specifically? Cars are a Sisyphean task. Fuck, don't tell me that, Bleep Lord. I'm really hoping that I'm able to, like, have this resolved now. You know? Like, this car I got is used, it's 10 years old. It should be okay, though, for at least a couple years. Like, I don't need this car to last me for the next 10 years. I'm not really expecting that. It should be okay for at least a couple years, though, especially after I got it inspected. Now I've had to put this new starter in. Hopefully, gonna be okay. I should check my oil. You probably should. We all got to take care of these things. Christian Zionists are putting mezuzahs up in their door frames in solidarity with Zionist genociders. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. That's a strictly Jewish practice, and now it's being co-opted. There's this whole my zuzah, your zuzah movement, and people are making bank on it. Yeah, that's pretty fucking gross, Husker. You know, it's weird to me how Zionists have accepted the support of these evangelical Zionists and formed this kind of de facto political bloc with them, considering the fact that these evangelical Zionists are literally Zionists because they think Jews are going to hell and they think all the Jews should leave their community and go to Israel so the apocalypse can happen and the second coming can happen and those people can go to hell. Why is that okay? And people will sit there with a straight face and be like, these evangelical Zionists support Jewish people, and people that are critical of Israel are anti-Semitic. What is with that? That is so fucked. That is insanely fucked. And then we have Christian evangelical Zionists wagging their finger around and calling other people anti-Semites because they want Israel to stop doing genocide. That is insane. That is completely insane. What's a little attempting to bring about the Armageddon between friends? It's fine to be anti-Semitic if you allow Israel to commit a genocide. That seems to be the big deciding factor about whether that's okay or not. Definitely. Surely the millenarian death cult aren't thinking my death will bring about the end times. Just insanity. It's just pure insanity. You know, there's one thing... Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put up the title first. Didn't South Africa do all this shit before they collapsed? Kind of, yes, but South Africa didn't have the full enthusiastic support of the United States, and they didn't have this full kind of suicide pact with the United States, the most powerful imperialist force in the world. There was a point where it became untenable, and South Africa was cut loose by the Western ruling classes. And Israel has positioned itself in such a way that makes that a lot more difficult. They're also nuclear armed as well. A lot of people going through it this week with Palestine and now Lebanon, and closer to home, Marcellus Williams. Well, I mean, Marcellus Williams' execution, and especially some of his poetry, should be yet another indication of the ways that the Black revolutionary struggle and the Palestinian revolutionary struggle are fully linked together, right? Also in the way that Israel develops weapons and surveillance systems and police tactics that are used against racialized people in the US and Canada as well. We're going to get to all that. First, I just wanted to have a brief conversation here about Stephen King's The Stand, if you don't mind. I would like to get into we're going to talk about the war on Lebanon and look at some videos about that, and we're going to talk about all this stuff. I wanted to take a brief moment here just to talk about this kind of pop culture subject. Was just thinking about The Stand. Well, that's the thing. I've been driving a lot lately. I've been going on these longer drives, and part of making that tolerable is joining the audiobook lifestyle. And that's what I did. Driving around a bunch over the last couple of days, I put on the audiobook version of Stephen King's The Stand. Because it's just really, really long, obviously. And driving an audiobook's iconic duo. This is what I'm getting into now. This is my lifestyle now. I don't know if I can just shorten it to the lifestyle. Anyway, I think The Stand is really interesting to talk about and think about. Because The Stand it's got big problems. I think there's big problems with The Stand, like as a full novel, as a full story. But the parts of it that are good are like some of my very favorite things ever. Like in that genre of, Jesus Christ, what's going on? There's like a massive fire or something. In that genre of like post-apocalyptic fiction, The Stand is just up there with just about anything. And I don't love as a whole, I don't love it. It's got big problems. I think it's pretty racist. In that liberal way, like this is the whole thing, is that I think it's an interesting way to examine Stephen King's liberalism and to talk about and think about the liberal mind and how it works. I think the racism in The Stand is a part of that, because it's this kind of like paternalistic, kind of sanctimonious racism where it's like, how could I possibly be racist? I've made this like main character in my novel, this 109-year-old magical black woman that is like receiving messages from God, and I've made her the avatar for everything that's like goodness and holy and good about humanity, and I've deified this person, kind of sanctified this person. Does King of an ode to Bandera in it? Well, we'll get to some of this, Dimitri. Montreal police, he's streaming again. Go get him, boys. That's how they talk in Montreal. Go get him, boys, man. That's how they talk about it. So not only is that whole trope of like Mother Abigail, and this to me is like when that gets introduced, when the book starts going off the rails for me. That's an example of this kind of like liberal racism. There's some uncomfortable usage of the N-word, I think, throughout, coming from character. That's always the kind of excuse. It's like, oh, it's coming from these characters, but I think some like a little weirdness with that as well, I would say. But I think the thing about The Stand, I think it's interesting to talk about the liberal mind on a number of levels, on this kind of like racial dynamic, and in some of the politics that are found in this book. And to me, it's like to me, The Stand is like two books. There's one book that's about the first 400 pages that's very grounded in reality and science fiction, and it's just this very like disturbing and cool, very slow burn story about this like very kind of plausible and believable super flu spreading throughout the United States, and this kind of slow motion collapse over a few weeks of the United States as this disease spreads. And even though like there's things in there that maybe I don't like as much, but overall it's just I just love it. It just never gets old to me, no matter how many times I read it. And then in the second part of the book, that's when it brings in these kind of like supernatural religious elements. You got King doing his kind of standard kind of like telekinesis powers and magic and all that stuff enters into the story. I think that's take it or leave it for me. Maybe some people really like that stuff. I think it drastically shifts the tone of the book that initially gets established there in the first 300-400 pages. And it's also this is what King really does well, is that it's a gripping story, but it's told through these characters that you want to spend time with. Like if you don't have characters that you want to spend time with, then your story is like meaningless, So that is something that I think is really expertly done in this book that I enjoy every single time that I go through it. And as you get introduced to these characters, they present this kind of certain status quo, and then that status quo gets like brutally upended in these like really terrifying ways. The initial period of the actual apocalypse unfolding is always so much more interesting than post-apocalypse, which was a more common subgenre. I agree. Yeah, I think sometimes in those kind of movies we pick up after everything's over, and I've always been kind of interested in like what was going on in the weeks before that. Like 28 Days Later is a good example of that. And I love 28 Days Later, but it's like, what were those 4 weeks like, you know? And The Stand really, that's the whole first 400 pages of The Stand, and it's just so expertly done. I really enjoy it. They're doing 28 Years Later. I did see that. Yeah, I did see that. That's very cool. King's character psychology is the thing he does best. Yeah, exactly. And like when you can combine like an interesting and gripping and exciting and scary story with these characters that you just enjoy spending time with, it is, that's why he's as successful as he is, because he's able to do that pretty often. And The Stand is probably one of the best examples of that. Still more sirens. Maybe the apocalypse is unfolding right now in Montreal. Maybe it is. So that's it. It's like a story that I really love. I don't love all of it. I don't really like. I've read it a couple times, but I think the second half is kind of take it or leave it for me. I like the 28 Days Weeks films, but I hate fast zombies. It's not fair to the humans. Well, Plungerman, I liked that like in 28 Days Later, the fast zombies had a reason for like being like that. But the problem was then it had all this influence on other zombie movies, and then zombies stopped being slow in like all zombie fiction and started being fast. That I did not like. I like the slow zombies. But that's why the 28 Days Later, they're not zombies. They're the infected. They have the rage virus. It's different. And that made it different. But I don't want to see I don't want to see fast zombies in other zombie fiction. Bring back squibs and slow zombies. Thank you. Two main things that I care about here in life. But talking about The Stand, though, I do think it's really interesting. It is an interesting glimpse into the liberal mind. TLOU does fast zombies well. They're more infected and stronger. I feel like that makes sense. Yeah, it does make sense. The whole cordyceps thing. Again, if you have like a textual reason for like why these things are different, then it's okay. But if it's just a zombie, it should be the George A. Romero zombie. Well, what was I saying? Yes, I think it's a good glimpse into the liberal mind, and I think Stephen King is a very like obviously now from how like public he is, an interesting person to kind of analyze and develop a kind of critique about. Even if there's a lot of things that he's written or created that I really think is great. What the hell is going on here today? Maybe the zombie apocalypse is starting right now. That's one of the things I really like about Shaun of the Dead, actually. The first, like, 20, 30 minutes of Shaun of the Dead, you just hear sirens in the background, like, constantly. The platonic ideal liberal mind. So one thing that I find interesting about The Stand, like, to say nothing of, like, the kind of paternalistic racism and the magical black woman tropes and all this kind of stuff.
To talk you through all this.
Where there's a lot to critique about that. And, again, that's for me when it kind of goes off the rail. That's kind of when I start tuning out. Even though there's some okay stuff in there, like in the whole post-apocalyptic section, there's some interesting stuff, but it's generally where I put it down. To me, it's 2 books. There's the first 400 pages and there's everything else. I read the first 400 pages like once every couple of years. So there's that, but there's also something that I find really interesting as well, which is like it's getting to this point in the book where things really start to get bad, and there's been this kind of ongoing cover up. Here's the thing about The Stand is that
you can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I wasn't ready to support Biden when we started this journey, but I've come around and will be writing him in this time.
Thank you, Ice Tray, for the 31 months. I appreciate it. Here's the thing about The Stand, which is that it has a kernel of like actually radical politics in it. The whole premise of The Stand is riding with Biden to the end. Exactly. That is the premise. The whole premise of The Stand is that the United States government, against like the Geneva Conventions and like all these international laws about germ warfare and all this stuff, create in a lab this like super virus, this super flu that has like 99% communicability and like a 100% death rate that just instantly kills whoever gets it and mutates, and you can't take it. There's nothing you can do to prevent the symptoms from happening, except for like if there's a few people that are just naturally immune, a small percent of the population. So the whole thing is about the United States government creating this virus in a lab. There's a lab leak where this virus, like through some accident, escapes from this lab. There's a guard at this facility that escapes the facility, and he becomes a carrier, and he drives his car to Arnett, Texas, which is a fake city, I think, and he spreads it afterwards to the entire United States. And there's this whole point, like there's a whole perspective character of this like army guy that's like overseeing this whole project and overseeing the whole collapse of everything. And at one point he suggests that like they've got people with this genetic material in the USSR, in China, and around the world. And they're just like, yeah, we're going to spread it there as well. So it's not just America that collapses. There's this whole like mutual suicide pact. So not only does America create this, the United States government creates this virus that wipes out 99% of the world population. They also, once it escapes containment in the US, they also deliberately spread it throughout the world to its enemies. So there's no like, so it's like, what do they say? Share and share alike. That's what the guy says, you know? So like, Arnett is a real town, not too terribly far from me. Super, super small though. Okay, well, there we go. You know what I mean? This is a fairly radical idea. Like this is the evils of the United States government, that it would do this kind of thing, you know? And there's something interesting about that. There's this, the US creates a virus, then denies the vaccine. That sounds unreal. Yeah, and they lie to everybody about like how deadly the virus is. They're like, don't worry, a vaccine's coming. Just stay home and drink lots of fluids and you're going to be fine. They're like managing the news stations so the news can't talk about all the corpses that are being shoveled off of trucks into the ocean and stuff like this. They're like, you know, yeah, managing the news. They're killing journalists that are trying to get the story out and everything. When did you write that? In the 70s? Yeah, I think it came out in the late 70s, and then he released a revised version in the 90s, and he jumped up the timeline a decade, which is a kind of weird decision. I don't totally get why that he did that. And there's some weird things as well, because it's supposed to be like 91, and there's all these references to like, oh, we had just got one of those brand new color TVs, and it's like 1990. Anyway, I just find like there's germs of actually radical politics in this, where he like correctly recognizes that the United States government is like the evil empire, that it's capable of this like monstrous evil, literally developing a virus that destroys the entire world and deliberately spreading that around the world once it escapes containment. There's a great chapter where things really start to get bad, things start to get out of control, and it's funny as well because there's these like campus radicals, there's campus tankies that are 100% correct as usual. And these campus tankies in Ohio State and all these American universities are like, the American government is lying. They created this virus. They're spreading it to everyone. They're managing the news. And all these like wacky campus tankies are like 100% correct as usual, as they usually are about most things. This MFer said germs of radicalism when talking about an outbreak novel. Yeah, okay. I'm a pretty clever guy, obviously. It's even funny in liberal fiction that the commies are always right. Well, that's why I find it funny, because he on some level he understands this, but then if you have campus tankies right now saying like Israel's doing genocide in Gaza, don't support the Democratic Party, they're supporting the genocide. Stephen King's like, she's speaking. He wears a t-shirt that has Kamala Harris being like, I'm speaking. You know what I mean? It's like he understands on some level that the US government is just intrinsically evil, that these campus radicals correctly identify that and are 100% correct. And then they're mowed down by these like army units at the behest of the United States government in the book. But then he can't seem to apply that to the real world that we're living in right now. We're talking about The Stand, yes, because I was listening to The Stand audiobook. I'm really Stan-brained right now. So that's, you know what I mean about the liberal mind, though? That's something I find really interesting, where you correctly diagnose these really important things about the function of the government, the military-industrial complex, campus activism. But you can't take this thing that you wrote about so effectively in this book and apply that to things that are currently happening right now. I find that fascinating. That's fascinating to me. And there's also, so at the same time that he does kind of recognize that, there's the whole character of Randall Flagg, the dark man, the man with no face, the walking dude, whatever it is. And his whole thing is he's got all these different literatures. He's like this eco-terrorist, and he's a Nazi. He's like, he supports the KKK, and he's part of these like radical black activist groups, which inherently kind of suggests that these various extremes are like opposite sides of the same coin, the Dark Brandon analog. That's right. Must retain status quo, need shitty TV editions of books. Well, and that's the whole thing about retaining the status quo. And I know I've talked about this before. It's worth talking about again. In The Stand, after the whole collapse of the United States of America, and you got the situation where like these people that are immune are kind of like roaming through the country. They start having these dreams about visiting this magical black woman in Nebraska. Which again, this is when it starts going off the rails for me. But then they set up this community in Boulder, Colorado called the Boulder Free Zone. And in this community, they have this town meeting. And I know I've talked about this before. If you were here before and I've spoken about this exact thing before, I apologize. But they have this town meeting in the Boulder Free Zone. And they're adamant, like these characters, they're adamant. No, we're going to have the American flag and we're going to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And there's this effort to like rebuild the exact status quo, which Stephen King himself in this book correctly identifies as being incredibly evil and corrupt and something that must be destroyed. But then you have these people, you have this brand new America, you have an opportunity to make something completely new. Just start from scratch. And these people are just like, no, we're going to go back to being the United States of America. And we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance and have the flag and all this stuff. And I guess there's a kind of criticism there because then you have Randall Flagg going into Vegas and setting up his own community there, and it's very like law and order based and crime and punishment. And there's this criticism there. Oh, he's trying to rebuild the militaristic society. Oh, he's rebuilding all the things that like led to the collapse in the first place. But that's what the fucking people in the Denver Free Zone are doing as well. It's so bizarre to me. It's so bizarre to me that there's this like kernel of like a decent idea about politics in this book that King himself seems to be like weirdly blinded to. It's really strange to me. You ever played? No, I didn't play The Division, no. It's also funny and very liberal that he picked Boulder, Colorado, the place with the highest advanced degree rate in the country. He loves Boulder. It always shows up in his books in the same way that like Ogunquit and all these Maine towns do as well. And the guy's net worth is 9 figures. No correct political awareness is possible. Well, and I get that now as well, that he's become one of these kind of like very wealthy liberal elites. But I guess I'm talking about, this is a book that he wrote in the late 70s, like when he was still kind of like, he was successful by the time he put it out, but he wasn't Stephen King, He had written He had written a couple things. He'd written like Cujo and a couple of different things. He was a success. He'd become a successful author, but he wasn't like massively, hugely successful. I believe they specifically adopt the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, meaning they haven't abolished slavery yet in the Boulder Free Zone. This is what I'm saying. Like, you have this opportunity to like tear down these systems of oppression, which King himself acknowledges are evil and destructive and corrupt and violent and literally led to the collapse of the entire world and the deaths of 99% of the global population. But then that idea is never really like expanded on at all. You know, I just find that kind of weird. And again, we're talking about the liberal mind here. I think The Stand is a really interesting glimpse into the liberal mind. And even though I really enjoy it, I like it a lot, I also think there's big problems with it, and I think it's fun to talk about and have this kind of like critique of it. You know, you acknowledge that the United States government is this like incredibly evil force, and then you have your main protagonist being like, we must reconstitute this. King is absolutely Sorkin's version of Abby Hoffman in real life. I will say as well, though, the values of the right are control and obedience. The libs value their status. So that's interesting too. Anyway, like I love the book, and I read that first part of it, you know, once every couple of years. I think it's fantastic. And I had tried to watch the most recent adaptation of it. Like when it came out, I tried to watch it, and I found it unwatchable. Like I had to turn it off like midway through the first episode. And then last night I got in, and I was like, I was Stan brained. So I was like, why don't I give this another shot? And it's really unbelievable how bad it is. Like everything that's like good about the book, they it's kind of skipped over. Like I was saying, what makes the book work is this 400-page slow burn as this virus very slowly and gradually gets out of control, and seeing how that affects these main characters that he introduces you to, and all the memorable people that are like around them in their lives. You know, that's what makes the book work. I've never read it. Isn't it a lot of pages? It is a lot of pages. Again, I think just the first 300 or 400 pages are worth reading. And if you get really sucked into the story and you want to continue, you know, go for it. I don't think it's necessary, though. I think you can fully just read the first 400 pages and then just put it down and go on with your life. But it's crazy how badly they messed up that adaptation. It's really so bad. What do you mean the first 400 pages? Because it's like 950 pages long.
Use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
If a woman was in charge of Russia instead of the testosterone-fueled current leader, the war in Ukraine would be over by New Year's Day. We could all breathe a little easier. From Stephen King. That's right. That's right, Dimitri. Absolutely. And again, like that's what I'm talking about. Like he recognizes in this book the evils of the U.S. military-industrial complex, but he can't recognize like the role that the United States government and the military-industrial complex plays in Ukraine, and then believes these completely like childish, banal things about this fairy tale world about Ukraine and Putin and all this stuff that have no bearing on reality, and absolves the West and the United States government of all responsibility for creating the situation. This is what I don't understand about liberals in general, and Stephen King's a good example of this. You can tell that he understands certain concepts, but then he can't take these concepts or this analysis and apply it to anything in real life. But yeah, the adaptation is really bad. It's crazy how badly they messed up like so many things that are interesting about it. There's this weird focus, like they made the character of Harold Lauder like one of the main characters, someone who doesn't really get introduced until later, and is a kind of memorable character, this kind of like proto-incel type, school shooter type, and they kind of make him the kind of main focus of the series. It's really strange. There's this whole like time jump phenomenon that's going on, like where it jumps back and forth between timelines. It doesn't start at the beginning, so there's no stakes because you see all the people in the Denver Free Zone when the show starts, so there's no fucking stakes about anything that happens in the past when this whole apocalypse is unfolding, because you know exactly who's going to live and who's not going to live. I watched the episode. I started to watch the episode last night, and then I just turned it off. But the one with the character Larry Underwood, is one of my favorite Stephen King characters. Who's got this really cool backstory. Larry Underwood, he shows up in New York City, and then it goes over the last like 6 months of his life, where he goes from being this like nobody in the music scene in LA to being this like huge star. When this single that he writes for Neil Diamond, he records it himself. Finally, Neil Diamond doesn't want it. He records it himself, and it becomes this big sensation. And he goes from being this nobody to being this huge celebrity star. And he's in the middle of this big crazy party in LA, going on for weeks. And he gets in debt to all these like drug dealers, and he gets kind of in trouble, and his friend has to go like straighten him out. His friend has to go and like bring him for this walk and be like, you got to get out of here. You got to stop, kick all these people out of this party. Like you're so badly in debt right now. You're way in over your head here. Get the fuck out of LA. I'm going to try and help you deal with this. And he kind of straightens him out. He drives across the country and shows up at his mother's house in New York City a couple days later, which is where he is when everything starts to unfold. It's so cool. Like, it is so cool. It's such a cool backstory, and then all of this is just totally jettisoned in the TV series that I watched. It's barely even mentioned. It's just crazy to me how they took so much good shit in this book and just like did not use any of it. Like, really, to me, the only way that you could really make make an actual series of The Stand is to just do like a 12 episode first season that's just the first part of the book, you know, where you see the apocalypse ever so slowly unfold and how that affects all these different characters and the people around them. And then you can do season 2 or 3 and deal with everything else, and then people can just not watch it. But it's crazy to me with the budget that they had, and like they have a pretty good cast and they've got everything going for them, and it just sucks. It's borderline unwatchable, which is just it's a shame because there's a lot to like in that story. Old Dutch, hello Malaka, what's up? Did you watch the ABC miniseries with Gary Sinise back in the day? I've never watched the whole thing. It's definitely better than even though it's got its own problems, it's definitely better than this new one that they did. But it's very like made for TV. But it's significantly better than the new one that they just did. But it's still just not enough time. I think it's like 5 hours long altogether, this miniseries. It's still not enough time. Like, I think in order to really do this story justice, you need to give a lot of time, a lot of runway to describe this event unfolding. I wonder if Stephen King's not very involved and that's what happened. I think it was actually his son was involved, though. Like, these were creative decisions that were made, like, with his knowledge, I believe. And it's just real bad. I've now tried to watch it twice, and it's just, I find it unwatchable. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about this because I'm stand-brained, and like I was saying, I do think it's really interesting to look at some of the politics in this book, and to understand the way someone like Stephen King can correctly diagnose certain problems with Western society and American society, and then you see them all these years later not learning any of the lessons that they should have learned from their own goddamn material. I think it's just really interesting. But of course, yeah, when you have a 9-figure net worth, you're not really interested in challenging or upending the status quo or in any way, because the status quo is working pretty well for you. I'm a TLOU stan, so whatever zombie gets brought up, that's where my brain goes. They did a really good job with that show, I thought. I thought they did a really good job. I still prefer the game. There were changes that were made in the show that I didn't like quite as much. I really do love the games a lot, though, so I did watch it all, and there was a lot of it that I really liked. Outside of getting run over, it's going pretty well for him. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. He's doing quite well for himself. Saw Jane Fonda campaigning for Kamala. She used to be the NLF white girl, and it's a damn shame, isn't it? I know. Jane Fonda, Angela Davis, and that's a part of it, right? Is that these boomers and these older people, and again, I don't want to criticize Angela Davis too much. I think I feel a little weird criticizing Angela Davis for her takes on this. But I think it speaks to that generation, and they remember this kind of like radicalism that was going on in their generation, and they recognize the radicals of their time for being correct, but they can't seem to apply that to this current day. That's what I find really strange about some of these folks. The radicals were right then when I was one of these radicals. Now that I'm successful and now that I'm entrenched in the status quo, now the radicals are going way too far. And it's not like when we were kids and we were marched against civil rights and all this kind of stuff. What version of The Stand is good? I'm going to go ahead and say no adaptation is that good. The 90s miniseries is okay. The new one that they did is unwatchable. The book, though, is definitely, at least the first third of the book is some of the best stuff ever, and the other 2/3 are kind of hit or miss. But yeah, that's the longest version. That was the one that he did. He did the revised version in the 90s. Have you ever heard the "Love Me, I'm a Liberal" song? Yeah, Phil Oakes. I mean, Phil Oakes, all those years ago, absolutely nailed this exact ideology. You know, with that song. It's literally boomer libs these days, and it was the same thing in those days. And I think also correctly identifies that a lot of those people were less radical at the time than they kind of claim to be now. You know. Is there a psychopath that ascends to power in it? Yes, there is. Yes. Anyway, that Phil Oakes song still just does such a great job of analyzing this exact mentality. The problem all along has been testosterone-fueled leaders. Yeah, we need women like Kamala Harris doing genocide and executing innocent people and all this stuff. The "Love Me, I'm a Liberal" song. That's right. Phil Oakes, "Love Me, I'm a Liberal." He completely destroyed that entire ideology all those years ago, and still there's some people that try to make claim to this ideology. It's a damn shame. My dad had hair to his ass, down to his ass in the 60s and 70s. Now he's a city manager that hangs out with cops. The boomer hippies sold out. And that was what neoliberalism was, right? It was that generation of radicals buying in and then yanking up the ladder behind them. You know? They had access to all these like great economic programs that no one else has ever had access to in this post-war period. It was basically the most, financially secure generation. And still had this vein of radicalism when it came to Vietnam and civil rights and all this stuff, which is great. But then they bought in. They bought in and then they yanked up the ladder behind them so no one else could have access to those same things. Anyway, while we're talking about pop culture, it's interesting because we're getting into spooky season, and that's exactly what Invasion of the Body Snatchers is about, the 1978 version with Donald Sutherland. which is another one of my favorite movies, my favorite stories. It's about exactly that. It's about these 60s radicals right on the cusp of the neoliberal era, 1978-79, becoming neoliberal drones. Like, that's what this movie's about. It like predicted that whole era before it even happened. And something that I recommend everyone should watch because it's really one of the best movies ever. Hello, Crackety Kraken. What's up? Yeah, Leonard Nimoy's in it. S.V. Harkin. Jeff Goldblum's in it. Veronica Cartwright. The great Veronica Cartwright is in there. She did Alien and Invasion of the Body Snatchers back to back in 77, 78. Veronica Cartwright. What a legendary year she had there. Yeah, the movie's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, encouraging people. Definitely something that I recommend you check out. It's an interesting movie, but almost everyone I heard talked about it being about the fear of communism. Well, I think arguably, PM Trio, that's what the original is about. The original is also worth watching as well. It's kind of this like Red Scare allegory. And you can make an argument as well. It's not only about the fear of communism, but it's about the Red Scare as well, and it's kind of has a criticism of that as well. But Invasion of the Body Snatchers is not really about that. Invasion of the Body Snatchers takes place in San Francisco, like very specifically, I think, in 78. So it's like a decade after San Francisco 68, the whole Summer of Love, the Haight-Ashbury, all that stuff. And all the characters, even though they don't really talk about their backstory that much, you can kind of infer these characters were kind of part of these radical movements, you know? And then you see 10 years later, after this period, where they all are. And Leonard Nimoy has kind of like, he's kind of sold out. He's become this like pop psychologist, like celebrity novelist, writing this like self-help crap. Jeff Goldblum's character is trying to be this like angsty, angry poet, interesting writer, and is just no one cares, no one listens to him. Sutherland is just like working in the public health department, trying to like make sure that restaurants aren't feeding people rat feces and stuff like that. So you see these 60s radicals in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, these 60s radicals and where they are 10 years later. And then you have this like body snatching situation that happens, which really does like predate the whole Reagan era. It like predicts the whole Reagan era before it happens, of all these radicals slowly like giving up everything that makes them unique and interesting and becoming part of this like blob. You know, that's what it's about. It's really cool. And very, very prescient. You think they got Phil Oakes with the psychosis gun? Probably. They probably MK Ultra'd him. Anyway, chat. Hollywood made a lot of alien or monster invasion movies in the 50s, early 60s. The kinds where an alien on the poster would be bride carrying an unconscious human woman, and the plot of all of them would be 94% of the time be boiled down to fearless communists from outer space. Exactly. They're coming. They're coming to get you. Anyway, chat, I'd like to move on to talking about like the news in a couple of minutes, now that I've gotten some of this stuff out of my system. But hey, if you can, please subscribe. Please subscribe to this program if you can. As you know, I do this show. I try to do it every day. I've been failing at that for the last couple of months. That's on me. I have not been consistent at all, and I know consistency is key in trying to be a success here on twitch.tv. That's not on you. That's my problem. That's something I got to work out. But if you do enjoy this show and you like the analysis and the conversations and, you know, all the stuff that we do on here, I told you about some big guests I got coming up over the next couple of weeks. Rob is lying. He's been here every day at noon. There is no war in Ba Sing Se. That's right. But if you do enjoy this program, please subscribe if you can. Help me make this little number at the bottom of the screen go up. It's my main source of income doing the show.
Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
Oh, goodness. Diego, thank you for 10 gifted subs. Oh, my gosh, Diego. That's really, really kind of you. And for all the support over the years, Diego.
You can count on me. You're going to have good
it's
old
been
Rob
so,
to talk you through all this.
Valuable to have you in this community. You've been so supportive of me over the years, and it really means a lot. Thank you for that. And thank you, Little Baby Beef, as well, for a gifted sub. I appreciate that. And again, if you do want to support the program, please do if you can. Help me make the little number go up. It's my main kind of source of income doing this show. I love to do it. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to be here each and every day, hanging out with you fine folks and talking through all these interesting subjects. But as you know, the only way that I'm really able to do that is if the little number at the bottom of the screen continues to go up. So if possible, if you can, please subscribe and support the show. I should be back now on a more regular schedule.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I know I've been saying it for 6 weeks now. Okay? I get it. I know I've been doing that.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I know that I've been doing that. But I should be, like I said, I just got a laptop. I should be able to do the stream from elsewhere if I ever need to. And I probably will.
To talk you through all this.
So I'm going to really,
You should do a deep dive on the election results in Sri Lanka.
I'm going to really, really try to be more consistent doing the show, whether I'm here in my office or elsewhere. And that is the Rob Rousseau guarantee, which, as you know, you can count on fully. Comrade Bushy, thank you for the gifted sub. I appreciate all the support from you, Comrade Bushy, as well. Thanks, Little Baby Beef, for 2 gifted subs as well. Very kind of you. And thanks, Plunger Man, for the 30 months tier 2. Appreciate that very much. To do a deep dive on the election results in Sri Lanka. I mean,
good old Rob.
That sounds like something that would be very interesting and informative. Not something that I feel like I have a whole lot of foundational knowledge on. Maybe there's someone we can check in with that would have more something interesting to say that we could maybe like look at. Pizzicata, thanks for the 22 months as well. I appreciate you, Pizzicata. Thank you for that. Very kind of you. Again, I am trying to get back on track here finally. It's been difficult. You know, through the summer months, I spent a lot of time with my son this summer, which I was very happy to do. But it's been a struggle since that time, getting back to where I am and being consistent for a number of reasons. I am really working on that now. I'm hoping to be a little bit more consistent and able to do this more regularly or, you know, full time again, which I've been promising for some time. So if you appreciate that, you want to support the show, please subscribe if you can. We're at level 4 of this hype train. After this little call to action segment, I'll take a brief break and I'll come back and we can talk about what's been going on in the news. This escalating war in Lebanon, you know, there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about that I would like to get into. But if you can, please do subscribe. I got 12 subs to go to get to the goal. 12 measly subs to go. It could be done. I feel like it could be done. It's so cool you spend time with your son, remembering my times with my dad. It's super important to him as well. Well, it's important to me as well, Diego. Like I've been talking about, my son's been going through a whole lot of changes in his life lately. You know, a new house situation, new people in his life, new school going to, like, it's a lot. He's just a little guy, you know, he's going to turn 9 years old in a couple months, and it's a lot to have to be dealing with, even when you're a full grown adult. And, you know, it's really important for me that I'm able to, like, be there for him during this time. That's why I was really disappointed yesterday. I was supposed to come pick him up, and because of this car issue that I had, I wasn't able to do that. And apparently he was upset too, so that made me very sad. But I am really looking forward to seeing him later and hanging out with him later. Wait till puberty. Well, I know there's a whole lot more changes going on with that. I know that. I will cross that bridge when I come to it. If your son ever explains Skibbity to you, please relay the information. I mean, we've talked about it. I don't know. Is there much to explain? It's Skibbity Toilet. It's just there's a guy in a toilet. He's like a human toilet, and he sings a little song, you know? That's all. That's all it is. We don't need to overthink. We don't need to overthink it. So folks, 90 seconds left in this call to action segment. Again, I don't really do any like advertisements on this show. I don't really I get offered to do sponsorships with like HelloFresh and gaming shit. I always get these kind of like offers from Stream Elements. I have no interest in doing that. I have zero interest in doing it. This show is entirely supported by the audience and the listeners and the chatters and the viewers and the community members. So if you can, please do support the show. We got 1 minute left, 12 subs to go. I know it could be done. And then after that, we will move on and we'll talk about the damn news. I heard a small kid say, "What the skibbity" in real life yesterday. Very upsetting. That is upsetting. That is very upsetting. I agree. Don't you want to be a part of this? Exactly. I know. I know. All the kids are saying it, including us as well. This is why I think as adults we need to like use this kind of language. We need to pay attention to what the teens and the young people are saying, and we need to start saying that stuff and talking about it, because then it becomes lame. And that's how we can't talk to our kids and say like, "Hey, don't say that. You sound silly. You sound ridiculous," because that just makes them want to do it more. You know, we can't say that. Don't say skibbity. Don't say any of this stuff. We can't do it because then they're just going to continue. You know, what we can do is be like, hey, son, like what the skibbity is happening right now. And when we start saying it, then they're like, I can never say this now. My fucking dad is talking about it. You know, this is how we win. This is how we win, folks. The Hillary curse, exactly. Immediately co-opt it and strip it of any cool factor. Exactly. These nuggies are skibbity on God. FR. No cap. I've talked about my kid is saying cap now. You're capping. You're capping, Dad. And it's like, son, I'm not capping. I'm not capping at all, actually. I'm being totally serious. I'm about to hit the skibbity riz on that phantom tax because I'm trying to mew. Exactly. All caps are off, my unskibbity child.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old
So
Rob
bad.
to talk you through all this.
Oh my gosh. Jules, thanks for the 12 months. Very kind of you. Thank you for that. Did you see that Russia adapted and updated their nuclear program and actions due to modern international relations? They've admitted Belarus as a nation. If attacked, they will retaliate. And good. Obviously, they're free to do so, to develop these kind of mutual defense pacts, which is what NATO is in theory. Really, it's just an anti-Russian containment military alliance. Which is something that probably has been needed since the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact. Anyway, with Ukraine possibly firing long-range missiles at Russia, that should be no problem. Gosh, I'm very tired. Okay, so I'm going to just go on a brief interlude here for a few moments, folks. Please bear with me while I do that. Okay, I'll come back. We're going to talk about the news more.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Death to Orinoco Flow. Hoping the Irish don't also have an untouchably powerful lobby in the USA.
Perfect Speller, thank you for the 13 months. Very cool, Perfect Speller. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to just, take a little break, 5 minutes. Rob, I'm tired, Rousseau. It's just part of my personality now. Just part of my whole personality. It's like, hey, have you considered sleeping 8 hours a night? And it's like, absolutely not. I slept for 8 hours the other night, like a few nights ago, and I was like, wow, what an amazing, I just feel instantly so much better physically and mentally. Maybe I should do that like on a nightly basis. And I'm just like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so, Jack. I don't think so, Jack.
24th.
Okay, so please don't go anywhere, folks. Could be all the COVID. Maybe like it's could be anything for me. Like I could have permanent COVID brain fog and fatigue. That's entirely possible. I also just objectively don't sleep enough. I mean, that's the reality. So who knows? Maybe it's a little bit of both. Por qué no le dos? Anyway, don't go anywhere, folks. Don't go anywhere, folks. That was like a Good Place thing. Staying up too late reading them books. I have been reading more lately, which I feel good about. I think I was having like some kind of like self-esteem issues because I was having a really hard time reading all the books that I want to read. And there are still a lot of books on my shelf that I do want to read that I haven't read. I have been just like reading more fiction lately though, and I think I just have an easier time with that. You know? I read Old Man and the Sea, Hemingway. I read The Great Gatsby, which I had never read before. And I'm reading Vonnegut right now. I'm reading The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut, which is another one of his that I had never read before. So that's been good. That's been good. I do need to read all the nonfiction books that I have on my shelf that I have not gotten around to. I know I need to do that. I read Cat's Cradle recently and it kicked my ass. Vonnegut's just so great. Cat's Cradle is fantastic. Read the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson and combine literature with political theory. Yeah, I guess that's like why science fiction is such a cool genre. Not that other genres aren't also influenced by politics as well, but... Okay, folks, chat, don't go anywhere. I'm just going to be back in 5 minutes. We'll talk about the news, okay? Talk to you soon.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Okay, hello. Dr. Maggot, thanks for gifting a sub 6 minutes ago. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Apostrophe there looks a little weird, doesn't it? Oh, is this like McDonald's Moon Man guy that it's a character they brought in to advertise late night McDonald's? So let's talk about this. Last week we spoke a lot about these like pager terrorist attacks that happened in Lebanon. There was a lot of speculation about what that could possibly mean. We talked about the contrast between the ways that like our media and political establishment talked about this like pager attack in these terms, like celebrating it. Oh, it's this precise targeted attack against these Hezbollah pagers, just taking the word of the Israeli like government and military establishment like completely uncritically when they talk about this stuff, completely whitewashing the sort of criminality of it and the collateral damage of it. And we speculated on whether this is a precursor to another escalation. It seems like it was. Like now Israel's just, and this is what been the last, like not only Israel's entire existence, but just the last year, basically, of Israel just kind of like testing the limits of what it can get away with, testing the limits of what it can continue to do without getting their chain yanked by the United States of America. And there doesn't seem to be a limit. They engage in this like pager attack, which maims thousands of people, kills children and all these other victims of this horrible attack, which is spun as being like, oh, they just went after these Hezbollah pagers. And as I talked about, like on the Insurgents podcast last week, it's like, say what you want about groups like Hezbollah or Hamas, whether you agree with their ideology or their tactics or whatever is completely irrelevant. These groups are terrorist groups because they get designated to be terrorist groups from the United States government, which is the largest exporter of terrorism in the world. And just the idea that they've tried to create that anyone remotely affiliated with any of these groups just deserves instant death is fucking insane. Like these are groups that have a lot of power in these societies. Hamas is running all these civil institutions in Gaza and has for years. Hezbollah is a major political party in Lebanon that has an armed wing that has all these political functions as well. Creating this idea that these are just terrorist groups and anyone remotely affiliated with them deserves to be bombed and killed is fucking insane. And something that we do need to push back on. So that was the whole thing with the Hezbollah pagers. And now there's been this bombing campaign now going on in Lebanon, really escalating things. And the scary thing about the rhetoric that we're seeing coming out of Israel is that it's identical to how they talk about Gaza and the whole human shields. And Hezbollah now, they've just like switched the baddie of the day. Hezbollah is storing all these missiles and bombs and weapons in people's homes. That's why we're bombing all these civilian residences. And we're bombing these Hezbollah-affiliated hospitals and things like this. So that's the really scary thing. And now it's like this bombing campaign's escalating. We're going to look into some of the details of this. And still no sign of like any repercussions whatsoever for this. And still, if any of our leaders want to say anything, it's like all sides need to tone down, which is a code for the actual people being bombed and attacked need to not respond to this as we continue to diplomatically and financially support what is happening.
This news is funded by viewers like
Let's look
you.
at Democracy Now!
Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I am Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
At least 22 people have been killed in Lebanon today as the Israeli military continues its bombardment across Lebanon. Israel's expanding the zones of attack with strikes for the first time.
Like, and it's just, it goes back to what I was saying before. Like, what are we even supposed to say about this anymore? You know what I mean? Like, we do need to talk about it. I'm not saying we shouldn't. No one should be sticking their heads in the sand over this, but like, when is this going to stop? What needs to happen? And apparently the answer is, it's a rhetorical question. There's no actual red line. But what needs to happen for someone to step in and say enough is enough here? Like, what needs to happen for the United States to withdraw support? And there's all these stories breaking right now about how, like, they knew Israel was blocking aid into Gaza, which we all knew. We all knew immediately. Anthony Blinken lied to Congress about this. There's completely given up any idea of having any kind of like negotiation or peace deal or hostage negotiation. Netanyahu has made that clear that that's not happening anytime before the election. And still the United States refuses to step in and do anything about it. Like, it's actually insane. Especially when that like ex-CIA dude said it was terrorism. The intelligence community is to the left of Democrats and media. Fucking wild. A great setup for the future. I think there's a lot of evidence that there's factions of the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex that are not happy about any of this, which is crazy to talk about. And I don't think they're coming to those conclusions for like moral reasons. I don't think we should give them too much credit or anything. But there does seem to be evidence that there are people that are connected to this world that are like, what are we doing here? Bibi's address was the exact same bullshit. We're not at war with the people. We're at war with Hezbollah, yada, yada, yada. I would say get a new line, but obviously doesn't need to. The U.S. will be on his side no matter what. Seriously, he could just say, like, we are at war with the people. Like, you might as well just say it. We're at war with the people. What are you going to do about it? We're just going to keep killing civilians until Hamas gives up. We're going to keep killing civilians until Hezbollah gives up. Like, just say that. It's not like it would make any difference. Just say what you're doing. You know, you might as well at this point. Who even cares?
On the beach resort town of Jiyah, just south of Beirut, and Maisra in the mountains in the north. The death toll over the past 3 days is nearly 600 killed, including over 50 children, 40 women, with more than 1,800 people wounded.
And this is after the cell phone attack, the pager attack that killed
many going to Beirut and the
dozens of people and injured thousands,
and are sleeping in schools and parks in their cars. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees reports 2 United Nations staffers were among those killed by Israeli attacks on southern Lebanon. Ali Basma worked as a janitor at the UNHCR's Tyre office for 7 years before he was killed in an Israeli strike Monday. And Dina Darwish, a 12-year staff member of UNHCR's Bekaa office, who is featured in UNHCR videos, was killed along with her son.
This is the escalatory strike. That's right.
Seriously injured her husband and another of their children. Another Israeli strike killed cameraman Kamel Karaki of Al-Manar TV. Meanwhile, Hezbollah launched dozens of rockets at Israel, including a long-range missile fired toward Tel Aviv that was intercepted by Israeli air defense systems. The UN Security Council has scheduled an emergency meeting on Lebanon today at the request of France. For more, we go to Beirut, where we're joined by...
It's probably a principle of short-term gains versus long-term stability that's internally stratifying intelligence agencies. Yeah, again, I don't want to give these people credit. These are not good people that are part of and I don't think they're coming to any of these conclusions for moral reasons. And I don't want to give anyone that impression. But yeah, I think there's a recognition, rightfully so, in some of these communities or these factions within the military-industrial complex or the intelligence community. It's like, this is damaging us terribly. This is incredibly damaging to us and everything that we're trying to do on the geopolitical stage. The fact that we're going along with this still. And there's all these factions as well that want to pivot to China. That's where they see the enemy. We want to pivot to China. And we're being prevented from doing that now because we're getting bogged down in this psychotic, genocidal, ethnic cleansing campaign. And the IOF is publishing animated videos proving how Hezbollah is launching rockets from residential homes, clearly laying the groundwork to justify to the West why they have to level any building they want to. Well, and again, why would they not do that? Like we saw, it was Shifa Hospital. Netanyahu himself tweeted this, and which we covered at the time, this absolutely insane, it looks like video game footage of this like G.I. Joe style Hamas complex under Shifa Hospital. Does it matter? They attacked the hospital. You know, they killed dozens of people. They terrorized hundreds of people. They attacked the hospital. No such installation was ever found. What happened? What was the result? Nothing. Nothing changed. No consequences. Nothing. So why not? Why not just make more cartoons to explain what you're doing and justify what you're doing? You know, why not when there's no consequences? It's like a child. You keep showing the child they can just do whatever they want and all your threats are totally empty. They're going to keep doing the same shit. You know, it's not that complicated. Did not a high-up defense official state that the U.S. has almost depleted its Patriot missile stock to Ukraine and have almost no ability to recreate facilities to rearm? Like, this is what I mean. It's like some of these people are justifiably freaking the fuck out that they got pulled into this. But you got a lot of true believers making decisions. That's ultimately what it comes down to, isn't it?
By Aya Mesjoub. She's Amnesty International's Deputy Director for the Middle East and North Africa. Welcome to Democracy Now! Aya, since you're right there in Beirut, just describe the scene on the ground in the country.
Ideology, man. That's how they get you.
I mean, the onslaught that started Monday was really unprecedented. We saw tens and tens and tens of thousands of families hastily pack up their bags, leave their homes without any idea where they're going to next. All across Beirut now, you see cars that are parked with displaced families that have nowhere to go. The strikes have been expanding. There's a lot of misinformation around. People are paranoid about another pager walkie-talkie attack. I mean, the situation is really
everything is going according to
devastating.
plan.
And Amy, there's, I really want to put the death count into perspective here. In a single day on Monday, more than 500 people were killed, and that is a really astounding number. It is one of the highest daily death tolls in recent global wars. It is higher than most daily death tolls in Gaza in the past year. You know, in Gaza, despite the horrific Israeli onslaught, it took 18 days for the death count to reach 500. This happened in Lebanon in about 24 hours. In 2006, the 33-day war that took place between Hezbollah and Israel resulted in 1,100 deaths over 33 days. We've already achieved half of that in just 24 hours.
Insanity.
So the numbers are really unprecedented, and you see major panic across the entire country. People don't know where is safe anymore. The Israelis have expanded the areas that they're targeting. They're not limited to some areas in South Lebanon along the border and in the Bekaa. They've really expanded inwards into coastal cities, into mountains in the north. It really feels like nowhere is safe, and people are very much at a loss for what to do and where to go.
And Aya, what about these phone calls and text messages, and also reports of dropping of leaflets on the population by the Israelis? How are people reacting to that, and what indication do they have of even where to go?
So on Monday, the information minister said that around 80,000 people received calls to evacuate. And we tried to look into some of those calls, and there didn't seem to be any pattern for who was receiving these calls. Some people in Beirut received them. Some people in the south received them. In the Bekaa, it was really all across the country. So it seemed like a tactic that was more intended to cause fear rather than an actual evacuation. Some residents in South Lebanon did get more specific evacuation orders. But again, under international law, for evacuation orders to mean anything, they have to be effective, meaning that people must have the time to leave and they must have the means to do so. What we saw on Monday was anything but. I mean, the instructions that people got were stay away from, Hezbollah targets. Nobody knows. A civilian doesn't know where a Hezbollah target is. So people just fled with the clothes off their back. It took 14, 15 hours for some families to make it from South Lebanon to Beirut, and we were receiving reports that that there were some strikes on near where civilians were gathered to evacuate in traffic jams. We're still looking into those, but if that holds up, then that is also a serious violation.
And I wanted to ask you that Amnesty is calling for an international investigation into the deadly attacks using these exploding portable devices. Could you talk about what you're calling for and why, and why isn't this patently labeled as a terrorist attack?
So under international humanitarian law and human rights law, we don't use the term terrorist attacks. For us, attacks are either lawful or unlawful.
Dimitri, I guess like you say, we've been unfortunately razor thin close to World War III. It's like you guys start to wonder like how much longer this can go on. Like it feels like we've been like that for now multiple years at this point. Like I feel like we've been hovering over the brink of World War III. Maybe it's just started already. Like maybe that's all. And it's just like the start of it is going to be more obvious, years from now. But like, it really feels like we've been hovering over this abyss now for multiple years. I think we're in it. I mean, you could certainly make that argument. I think if China ever does make a move on Taiwan, which probably now would be the time to do so, if it came down to it, but if that does happen, then I think isn't that kind of the signal? The question is, though, like whether it's going to be, we're already here, but like any kind of world war is going to mean direct involvement of the United States military. Which so far is still being done in this kind of Cold War style proxy army thing. History's probably blurred our vision. We expect it to start on definite day instead of years of escalation. I think that's a good analysis. And obviously the United States is deeply involved in all these conflicts in Ukraine and in Israel, and they would certainly be involved in any kind of like Taiwan situation as well. But that's the question to me, is like, is will this stuff lead to direct confrontation? Because that's really the World War III that I think we would fully understand and not be ambiguous in any way. And all of this context, all this building up of it is a factor in it, definitely.
Our qualification of the pager attacks is if, as is being reported and as U.S. officials and Lebanese officials have said, Israel was behind the attacks, then international humanitarian law applies because these attacks were part of an armed conflict. Under international humanitarian law, it is prohibited to use weapons indiscriminately, which we found that the pager attacks were. The people who detonated the pagers did not know who was given the pagers or the walkie-talkies, and they did not know who would be around the individuals carrying those pagers and walkie-talkies. Therefore, the attack was indiscriminate and therefore unlawful under international humanitarian law and should be investigated as a war crime. The reason that Amnesty has called for an international investigation on this particular attack is because of the risks of this kind of warfare. It transforms everyday objects like pagers and walkie-talkies into essentially booby traps. And there is an explicit prohibition under international humanitarian law on the use of such booby traps. But we felt that such an attack, although it didn't cause nearly the same number of casualties as Monday's onslaught, did instill some fear and panic into the Lebanese society and is a really dangerous method of warfare to be using It was unprecedented, and the involvement goes far beyond just the Israeli military. There are allegations around various shell companies. So we're trying to look into all of the multifaceted aspects of this attack, but we do feel that an international investigation in this case is warranted.
I want to ask you, Ms. Jazoub, if you consider this a war on Hezbollah or Israel's war on Lebanon.
I wonder what she'll say.
I mean, in terms of the impact on civilians, it is undeniable that Lebanese civilians are paying the price. A lot of the media coverage of Monday's attacks was Israel strikes Hezbollah targets. However, we've looked at entire neighborhoods that have been flattened, residential towers that have been brought down, people's livelihoods, their shops, their homes, their cars, all in ruins. You mentioned the deaths of the 2 UNHCR staff members. The health minister also mentioned the deaths of 4 medics and paramedics. Ambulances are being hit, medical centers. And the wave of displacement from South Lebanon, the Bekaa, and other areas is now, I think, almost 500,000 people have had to leave their homes. Not all 500,000 people are Hezbollah. So the impact on Lebanese civilians has really been catastrophic.
And the response of the United States, President Biden just gave his last speech at the United Nations as U.S. president. Let's see, the EU foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, has characterized this as almost a full-fledged war. President Biden said too many on each side of the Israeli-Lebanon border remain displaced. Full-scale war is not in anyone's interest, even though a situation has escalated. A diplomatic solution is not possible. He said, is still possible, he said. IMS Jube. At the same time, the U.S. continuing to provide billions of dollars to the U.S. military, to the Israeli military.
Yeah, I mean, there's an obvious hypocrisy there. We've consistently, since October 7, have been calling for the suspension of weapons sales and shipments to Israel. We've continued to call for respect of IHL. We have, in at least one instance, documented a possible war crime that Israel committed in Lebanon using U.S. weapons. So if the U.S. really was serious about a de-escalation in the region, then they should
You were right the first time, Amy.
Arms and weapons shipments to Israel, and by also supporting judicial criminal proceedings, including at the ICC.
IMS Jube, we want to thank you so much for being with us. Amnesty International's Deputy Director for Middle East and North Africa, speaking to us from Beirut, Lebanon. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today.
Okay, well, that was a good way to set this up. There's also a new video by Ben Norton that I think would be good to look at that gets into the roots of Hezbollah.
On Lebanon.
So maybe we should look at this. I think Ben Norton's going to get into the actual historical kind of materialist aspects of this war and why Hezbollah is there in the first place. And, the way that these groups get dismissed as just being these terrorist groups, that's the only reason they exist is because they want to spread terror and fear and violence, while ignoring all of the context, all of the historical context about why these groups exist in the first place. It's really insidious the way this happens.
Israel is waging war on Lebanon. This started on the 17th and 18th of September when Israel carried out an act of terrorism in Lebanon, blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies that killed dozens of people, including civilians, and injured over 3,000 people. Israel killed at least 4 children in this terrorist attack. It was so blatant that even the former director of the CIA, which is the master in terrorism and assassination, even former CIA Director Leon Panetta said that it was a form of terrorism carried out by Israel against the people of Lebanon. Soon after, Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant announced a, quote, new phase of war. He announced that Israel is sending more troops to the north, to the border with Lebanon, and Israel began launching airstrikes, killing hundreds of people in Lebanon. In just one day, on the 23rd of September, Israel killed nearly 500 people in Lebanon, including dozens of civilians, and Israel injured more than 1,600 people. And by the way, this Israeli defense minister, Yoav Gallant, has been personally accused of crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court at The Hague. In a statement in May, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan said that Yoav Gallant and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are guilty of starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, as a war crime, willful killing, intentionally directing attacks against civilians, extermination, and persecution as a crime against humanity. Now, those ICC charges of crimes against humanity against Israeli officials are over their war crimes in Gaza. And top United Nations experts have said that Israel is carrying out genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza and have called for an arms embargo, although the US and some European countries have continued sending billions of dollars of weapons to Israel. And Israel is under investigation by the International Court of Justice, the top UN legal authority, on accusations of genocide in Gaza in a case that is supported by many countries around the world. So Israel is expanding the genocidal war that it's waging in Gaza now into Lebanon and the rest of the region. And the United States is supporting Israel and arming Israel as it's carrying out these crimes against humanity. And the US Defense Department, the Pentagon, published a statement on the 23rd of September defending Israel as it carries out a war of aggression against Lebanon. The Pentagon revealed that U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who, by the way, was until recently on the board of directors of the weapons corporation Raytheon, well, Lloyd Austin held 2 phone calls with Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant, who has been accused of crimes against humanity by The Hague. And in these phone calls, Lloyd Austin, quote, reaffirmed the United States' commitment to Israel's right to defend itself as Hezbollah extends its attacks deeper into Israel, end quote. So the Pentagon is claiming that Israel is supposedly defending itself after Israel started this war of aggression by carrying out a massive terrorist attack inside Lebanon, which again, even the former CIA director admits was a massive Israeli terrorist attack. So the US government is strongly supporting Israel as it carries out this war of aggression against Lebanon. And of course, Israel is using US weapons, US bombs, US missiles, US military equipment, in addition to the political and diplomatic support that it gets from Washington.
We all do, old
Israel
Dutch.
could not carry out this
We
war.
all want to see more extreme consequences. This is the big thing that we're all faced with right now. It's like it's a normal human reaction to watch the violence and the criminality unfold over the last year and not want to like see consequences for it. But it's like at the same time, I understand the level of patience that's been going on as well, as much as it might be painful sometimes, because you got a nuclear-armed, psychotic state lashing out with full support of the greatest military power in the world, the greatest imperialist power in the world. And people know full well what escalating fully would mean, you know? And it feels like there's been this incredible amount of patience to not take the bait, which is, it feels like exactly what Israel wants is to provoke that kind of retaliation. So the U.S. has no choice but to fully get involved. Oh yeah, absolutely, old Dutch. In for the long game. I'm talking more Nuremberg-style trials. I mean, if we live in a world that has any kind of justice whatsoever, we will see that. We will see something like that eventually, after this madness is over with. And not like the Nuremberg trials, which did go after a lot of prominent Nazis, but didn't go nearly far enough. It was almost like a show trial in a way that had some consequences, but also obscured the fact that Germany never denazified and the United States nazified itself and Canada as well. So maybe some actual trials that didn't just obscure the fact that the exact ideology was being rescued by the West. I don't want to discount Nuremberg. Like, it was still important. It's almost, when you read back about that history and like the role that like Alan Dulles was playing and FDR and all this stuff, almost a miracle that the Nuremberg trials happened in the first place. They were powerful factions in the U.S. government that didn't want any kind of trials or any. There were powerful factions in the U.S. government that wanted the Nazis to stay in power. They just wanted to get rid of Hitler. They were like, it's very similar to Israel and Netanyahu right now. It's this guy Hitler is way out of control. They wanted to keep the ruling class of Germany in place. They wanted to keep the Nazi party in place, just change the leadership and integrate them more into the West and stop the war. Yeah, the Devil's Chessboard does cover this some. So as much as the Nuremberg trials and the whole denazification process was extremely insufficient, it's actually a fucking miracle that they happened at all.
Were it not for U.S. support. So what is Israel's goal in Lebanon? Well, Israel's education minister, Yoav Kitch, admitted it in an interview on Israel's Channel 14. He said, quote, Lebanon will be annihilated, end quote. And then he
it's not
added,
National
quote,
Socialism, just
Lebanon,
Hitler. That's right.
as we
That's
know
what people were
it,
saying.
will not exist, end quote.
אין שום הבדל בין חיזבאללה ללבנון.
Identical language to that Hamas and Gaza.
לאור כמו שהדברים מתקדמים. ואני אומר את זה אפילו עכשיו בצורה מאוד בוטה. אנחנו באירוע שבו לבנון הולכת לקראת השמדה. לבנון כמו שאנחנו מכירים אותה לא תהיה קיימת.
The Devil's Chessboard is so great.
And by the way, this Israeli Channel 14, where this Israeli education minister called for annihilating Lebanon, this channel has transmitted at least 50 calls for genocide against Palestinians, according to a report in the leading Israeli newspaper Haaretz. I'm reading the headline from this top Israeli newspaper. Quote, Israel's far-right Channel 14 has repeatedly called for genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, end quote. And now it's transmitting calls for genocide in Lebanon as well. This also comes after Israel's agriculture minister, Avi Dichter, who's a member of Israel's security cabinet, admitted that what Israel is doing in Gaza is a new Nekba, the Gaza Nekba. This is the Arabic word for catastrophe. He's referencing the mass ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in 1948, this genocidal attack upon which the state of Israel was founded. And he was boasting of that. He said, we're rolling out Nekba 2023. He said this last year. And then another member of the Israeli cabinet, the minister of the diaspora, Amichai Chikli, one of the top Israeli officials, also admitted what Israel's goals are in a tweet on Twitter. This was in Hebrew, but as the auto-translate from Google shows, in this tweet, he said that Lebanon and Syria and Iraq are not real countries. So he's admitting that Israel's goal is to colonize part of Lebanon, to steal part of Lebanese territory. He said, Lebanon does not meet the definition of a country. He claimed that the Lebanese government, which sits at the United Nations, is not sovereign, so blatantly denying the sovereignty of Lebanon.
It does
then
seem
he
like it,
claims
Dimitri.
that Syria and Iraq are not real states. They're not real countries. So Israel does not recognize the legitimacy of these countries that are sitting at the United Nations. And to justify this, what did he do? He included a map of borders that Israel wants to change, and he invoked the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916 during World War I, a colonialist agreement made between the British and the French empires, in which they took out a map and carved up West Asia and decided, we will colonize this area, you will colonize this area. So the Israeli regime is invoking 100-year-old European colonial agreements to justify trying to colonize Lebanon while denying sovereignty to Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria, saying that they're not real countries.
It's Israel insisting any other country is not real is just really rich. That would be like Canada doing the same thing. Canada questioning the legitimacy of another country. Canada, one of the fakest countries that there is. It's really laughable.
And he says blatantly in this tweet, he says that Israel must
Always
recalculate
projection,
the course
zero order.
regarding
Always
the borderline with
Always
the
a confession.
entity that calls itself the State of Lebanon. So he's saying openly, admitting, this member of the Israeli cabinet, this Israeli minister, admits that Israel's goal is to change the borders of these countries in the region and to colonize not only Gaza and the West Bank, which is Palestinian territory, but also colonize Lebanon. That is Israel's goal. It's to expand the colonial project and have a greater Israel, to expand Israel's borders and colonize more and more parts of the sovereign countries in the region. What this shows is that Israel continues being a Western colonial project that has its origins in European colonialism. The founding father of the Zionist movement that created Israel through the mass ethnic cleansing of Palestinians was named Theodor Herzl. He was a European colonialist who was inspired by the British colonization of Africa. He wrote a letter to the genocidal British colonialist Cecil Rhodes in Africa, after which the colony Rhodesia was named. And in this letter, the founding father of the Zionist movement, Herzl, proudly referred to Zionism as a colonial movement.
It's funny because when you say this now, the people that believe in this ideology are like, "What? You're being anti-Semitic." There was that whole thread. I don't know if people saw this thread on Twitter the other day where someone was like, "Wikipedia is anti-Semitic because it describes Zionism like this, like the way the founders of Zionism described it." And the people that adhere to this ideology are they're offended by this idea that anyone could like correctly recognize what this all means. They get so pissed off when you point this stuff out, like you're making stuff up, and it's literally like in the founding documents of their own ideology. It correctly describes their ideology as it defines itself. Insane.
Proudly referred to Zionism as a colonial movement. And then in 1917, the year after the Sykes-Picot Agreement was signed by the British and French empires, the British Empire gave a green light to the creation of the Israeli colony, Western colony, in the Balfour Declaration. So here we are in 2024, and the Israeli regime is run by far-right extremists, fascist fundamentalists, who are openly invoking 100-year-old colonial doctrines to justify colonizing more and more of West Asia, denying the sovereignty of Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, while carrying out genocide against the Palestinian people. And
we should there form a portion of a rampart of Europe against Asia, an outpost of civilization as opposed to barbarism. We should, as a neutral state, remain in contact with all Europe, which would have to guarantee our existence. Theodor Herzl. Dimitri, it's crazy. Like people say, you're an anti-Semite for being like, it's this colonial outpost designed to like protect the West from the Asiatic hordes. And like, how dare you say that, you anti-Semite? And it's literally like just quoting from Herzl, from the founder of Zionism. Like, it's just madness. You can't even talk about, you can't just say basically true things about this place. Just like Taiwan, very similar. As we've repeatedly talked about, Ukraine, it's a colonial outpost on Russia's border. Israel, it's a colonial outpost in the Middle East. Taiwan, it's a colonial outpost on the border of China. You know? When we talk about this stuff and be like, well, we have to respect Israel's sovereignty. We have to respect Ukraine's sovereignty and Taiwan's sovereignty. They're not sovereign. This is what I keep trying to go back to, right? These places are not sovereign. They're Western military bases. And that's all. And you don't have to even like Russia or China to openly talk about this. You don't have to like the Russian government to acknowledge this. How dare countries refuse American nuclear bases on their border? It's just so unreasonable. That's right.
And they're doing this with the full support of the U.S. empire, unflinching support of the U.S. military and the political class in Washington, including President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, former President Donald Trump, and almost all members of the Republican and Democratic parties.
Looking at a map of American military bases makes it so obvious. For sure, yeah, just encircling everyone, And like we get so offended at the idea of like China or Russia or whoever taking steps to alleviate some of that pressure of being militarily encircled in this way. Turkey too, isn't it in NATO since it's close to Russia? Yeah, I mean, Turkey is kind of an interesting example, isn't it? Because even though they are a Western ally, they are a NATO ally, but now you have Erdogan going out and saying all kinds of like really crazy shit at the UN and almost threatening to blow up NATO. He's kind of an interesting figure. I don't like. It's hard to get a read on like what the actual motivations are. If he's just like a Western puppet that's trying to placate his population who don't want to be Western puppets, or if there's something more going on, I don't know. But his speech at the UN the other day was really interesting.
This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization. For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together.
And to justify this, Israel and its supporters in Washington claim that Israel has to defend itself, in scare quotes, from the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah with complete lies and fabrications. So the first lie is that Israel is under attack and Israel has to defend itself. In reality, even British state media, the BBC, has acknowledged that Israel is responsible for the vast majority of attacks on Lebanon since October 2023. From October 2023 until the end of June 2024, Israel carried out the vast majority of the more than 7,400 cross-border attacks. So for instance, in February, Israel carried out more than 800 attacks on Lebanon, whereas Hezbollah carried out around 150 attacks on Israel. In December, Israel carried out more than 800 attacks on Lebanon. Hezbollah carried out fewer than 200 attacks on Israel. So Israel is very clearly the aggressor. But to try to justify this colonial war of aggression being carried out by Israel, Western governments are relying on ignorance about Hezbollah. This is one of the most misunderstood groups in the West. They say that Hezbollah is supposedly a terrorist organization without explaining
always the same map.
That the vast majority of countries on earth do not recognize
always the same map.
Hezbollah as a terrorist
organization. There it is again.
In fact, it is only a few countries in the West which represent a minority of the global population.
The same map.
And most countries
every
in
fucking
Asia
time.
And Africa and Latin America do not recognize Hezbollah as a so-called terrorist organization. And furthermore, we should keep in mind that Hezbollah has both a political arm and a military arm. And the political wing of Hezbollah is a registered political party in Lebanon. It is part of the democratically elected parliament in Lebanon, and Hezbollah's political wing is not recognized as a terrorist organization by many countries in Europe, including France. France recognizes Hezbollah's political wing as a legitimate organization, along with the vast majority of countries on earth. So the US says, we claim this organization is a so-called terrorist organization, and the rest of the world must obey what we say. This is not according to the United Nations. This is not according to international law. But the Western media simply regurgitates the claims of the US government and expects everyone else to believe what they say. So here, in the rest of this analysis today, I'm going to explain what Hezbollah is, where it came from, and how in reality, Israel bears responsibility for the creation of Hezbollah, which was founded as an organization that was defending the sovereignty of Lebanon after years of illegal military occupation of Lebanon by Israel, which invaded Lebanon and carried out horrific crimes against the Lebanese people, just as Israel has carried out horrific crimes against the Palestinian people and has illegally occupied Palestinian territory for decades with the full support of the United States. In 1982, Israel invaded South Lebanon, and in 1985, it officially began a military occupation.
Weird
There's
that
a
these
report
imperialist
I'm reading
countries always
here
help
from
create
the
these
Los
counterfactions.
Angeles Times titled Israel
It is
Leaves
weird,
South
isn't it?
Lebanon after 22 years. This article was published in 2000. The Los Angeles Times pointed out that Israel actually began launching attacks inside Lebanese territory in 1978, carrying
Whatever that dissenting former CIA guys say, I don't get how this isn't beneficial. It's increasingly normalized and accepted. I'm pessimistic the average Westerner is so depraved. I mean, there's no denying that, Alexandro. I guess like my view on that is like it's not beneficial because the whole like international rules-based order and all our rhetoric about human rights and all this and sovereignty and democracy and freedom of the press and all this stuff has been exposed to an entire generation of people as being complete bullshit. Maybe they're not worried about it. Maybe they're just going to go like for Hillary, saying like Hillary was on TV the other day being like, all these student protests are funded by Iran with talking points being given out by these foreign actors, and they're having their brains reprogrammed by this Chinese algorithm on TikTok to hate Israel, and that's why they don't like Israel. That's what Hillary Clinton is on TV saying right now. So maybe they're going to just like pretend that's not going on.
So some leftist based in Canada, I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Oh, Majority Report, hello. Thank you for the raid. I appreciate it. Majority Report, welcome in. It's me, Rob. It's nice to talk to you. Bring it on in here. Please smash the follow button if you can. We're just talking about this escalating war on Lebanon right now. How was the Majority Report stream today? We're just talking about the ways that like this whole Israel situation over the last year, how there seems to be like a faction of the intelligence community or the military industrial complex that seems to kind of recognize that this is kind of a disaster, and talking about this is a Matt Leck supremacist stream. Yes, it is. We're big Leck heads over here on this stream. And I was just talking about the ways that like all our high-minded ideas about human rights and democracy and sovereignty and the rule of law and freedom of the press and all this stuff has been completely annihilated by this conflict. That's one reason why I think even people in this kind of like military industrial complex blob, national security blob, recognize that this is like an unfolding disaster that hurts the United States and doesn't really help anything. And I was saying like maybe domestically all the propaganda is going to work and people are still going to be on board. A lot of Americans and Canadians and people in the West have been exposed as being total psychos by their support of this. You've got Hillary Clinton going on TV and blaming like the TikTok algorithm and Iranian-funded protests and talking points, talking about that's why American and Canadian college kids are against the war and this genocide in Gaza, and not just like having basic empathy, is I think the main reason. People are seeing nonstop footage of this kind of horrible crimes and violence and disgusting footage that we've been seeing over the last couple of years. I think that's more than anything has to do with anything other than like, more so than like talking points being distributed by Iran or some kind of nefarious Chinese algorithm on TikTok. But I do think it's damaged our standing worldwide. Maybe not domestically, but worldwide, I think it's really damaged our standing, the kind of like Anglo-American empire. And also just from a military standpoint, they're getting depleted. They're spending so much energy and effort and resources into now sending weapons to Israel to drop bombs on little kids. Ukraine has no weapons to defend itself anymore. Like the whole Ukraine defense has been exposed as being totally unwinnable and impossible, and thousands of people have died needlessly as a result. And they certainly don't have the resources to now pivot to China, which is I think what a lot of these people in the military industrial complex want to do. They want to pivot to China and have that be the next battlefront, and they're not really able to because of how badly they're currently bogged down in propping up Israel while they engage in this genocide. So those would be the reasons why I think that there is a growing recognition among some of these people. And these are not good people. I don't want to hand it to them too much, but there's a growing recognition that this has been a total disaster for U.S. hegemony. The most unlikable politician, Hillary Clinton, just kind of doing what she does. It's just crazy squatch. Just like the idea that young kids aren't going to be radicalized by the nonstop streams of footage of little children in Gaza being blown to bits. It's not hard to understand why people don't support Israel in this generation. It's really not. It's not hard to grasp. We've all just seen nonstop footage of these grotesque, disgusting crimes for the last year, or longer than the last year if you were paying attention. We don't need Iranian distributed talking points. We don't need a Chinese algorithm to melt our brains and make us not like Israel. We don't like Israel because we see Israel constantly dropping bombs on little kids every single day for the last year. That's really the simplest possible explanation. We don't need to unpack that any further. It's really not that difficult to understand. Anyway, we're just looking at this video from Ben Norton going over the history of Hezbollah and what Hezbollah is and is not. Is it a terrorist organization or is it only deemed that way by the United States government? Why does it exist in the first place? Well, these are all things that we're getting into right now. That are just people looking at Lebanese friends and family. My friend's parents were almost killed in 2006. They're civilians traveling to visit family. Yeah, and hundreds of people have been killed just over the last 48 hours in Lebanon as this escalates. That's exactly where I drew the line, bombing children. I mean, it shouldn't be hard to understand, right? These are U.S. bombs being supplied by the United States government, both parties complicit in this, and these bombs are being used to murder little kids. It's as simple as you can possibly break it down to. Yeah, you can never unsee the footage, and then you have monsters like Clinton telling me not to believe your lying eyes. Yeah, it's just so fucking disturbing, man.
Out attacks on Palestinians, and then in 1982, Israel launched a full-scale invasion of Lebanon, which escalated into an Israeli occupation of South Lebanon in 1985. That occupation continued for 15 years until 2000, when Israel was forced out by
what malign foreign influence is fooling our youth into thinking war crimes are bad? This is the question. It's really hard for these people to wrap their minds around. Your eyeballs are indeed Hamas. One eyeball is Hamas and one is Hezbollah. The generation raised during the McCarthy era anti-communism is now accusing the newer generation of TikTok brainwashing. It's poetic injustice. It is disturbing how much McCarthyism is like coming back and how none. This is what I don't understand about this generation. It's like they learn, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the stream, if you missed that, but the kind of liberal mind. It's like they learn these lessons. McCarthyism bad. They learn this lesson. This is like that was the takeaway of that period. And then here we are, all these decades later, McCarthyism is coming back, and the very same people are being like, no, but it's actually good this time and necessary. This time it's real. This time there is this kind of foreign influence that we need to weed out. The same people that I lived through McCarthyism, and we learned the lessons of McCarthyism. No, you did not. You didn't learn the lessons. No lessons were learned. You learned nothing. And you're engaging in the exact same behavior now.
Resistance forces, which were led by Hezbollah. Hezbollah was formed in response to the Israeli military
Those images are just an
occupation.
Iranian shroud that you've allowed Ali Khamenei to pull over your eyes like the sheep you are. Awful. The lesson learned from McCarthyism, be on the right side of the McCarthyists. Exactly. Yeah, that's the lesson.
As an indigenous resistance organization based on an ideology of Shia Islam, but it is a kind of nationalist liberation theology ideology. And yes, it is true that Hezbollah has received support from Iran, but Hezbollah is not an Iranian proxy. It is not Iranian. They are indigenous Lebanese who are...
And also, we talk about like Iran-backed Hezbollah, Iranian proxies, when we never talk about the U.S.-backed Israel, the U.S.-backed Ukraine. You know, it totally obscures this dynamic and absolves the U.S. and Canada and all these Western countries of their role in arming and funding their own proxies around the world.
Resistance fighters who took up arms to fight against the Israeli occupiers backed by the U.S., who were illegally occupying their land, killing their family members, and they successfully expelled the Israeli occupiers after 15 years of armed struggle. And then, after Israel was expelled, Israel attacked Lebanon yet again in 2006, waging another brutal war, killing and injuring thousands of people in Lebanon. So Hezbollah is an organization that has defended the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Lebanon as a country. Now, there's also a very misleading Western narrative claiming that Hezbollah is an extremist Islamist organization, which is basically a lie. Now, Hezbollah is a Shia organization. It does have an Islamic nationalist ideology, but it is not extremist in the way that Al-Qaeda and far-right Salafi jihadist groups are, which are Sunni fundamentalists, Al-Qaeda and those groups similar to Al-Qaeda. They see Shia Muslims as basically worse than pagans and as heathens. And in fact, many of these extremist Salafi jihadist groups like Al-Qaeda, these terrorist groups, the main targets of their terrorist attacks are in fact Shia Muslims who are represented by Hezbollah in Lebanon. So in fact,
no patience for leisure left comms who still can't let go of their 9/11 Islamophobic hysteria. The resistance has to be perfect, completely flawless, utopian. It's like our guy, Michael Parenti, you know? He told us all about it. He told us all about this tendency in the yellow speech.
In fact, not only is Hezbollah a group that has defended the existence of other religious groups in Lebanon, because Lebanon is a very religiously diverse country, Hezbollah has in fact formed alliances with some Christian groups inside Lebanon. The Christian Science Monitor published a very interesting article titled, "In Hezbollah Stronghold, Lebanese Christians Find Respect, Stability." In a Christian home in a Shiite suburb of Beirut, images of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah share mantle and wall space with the Virgin Mary. Even the neoconservative US news website Daily Beast published an article acknowledging that Lebanese Christians had formed an alliance with Hezbollah in order to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other extremist Sunni fundamentalist groups. Now, obviously, the majority of Sunni Muslims are not extremists and do not support Al-Qaeda and groups like that. I'm not saying that Sunnis are all extremists, but what I am saying is that when you think of Islamist extremist terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they hate Shia Muslims. They hate groups like Hezbollah. They see Hezbollah as their main enemy. And of course, Iran is a majority Shia country, and these extremist Islamist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, they despise Iran. They consider Iranian Muslims to be non-Muslim, and those extremist groups have carried out many terrorist attacks on Iranians, on Shia Muslims in Iran. Now, I mentioned that Hezbollah had allied with Christians in Lebanon to fight against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. When did this happen? Why did this happen? This was part of the war in Syria, in which the US and its allies like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey, together, these countries and Israel supported far-right Sunni extremists in Syria that were trying to overthrow the Syrian government. And of course, Lebanon has a big border that it shares with Syria. So these extremist Sunni fundamentalist groups backed by the West
territory.
And Israel,
Can't have
they were crossing over the eastern border of Lebanon, the western border of Syria, crossing into Lebanese territory and taking over area inside Lebanon. So Hezbollah, being a very powerful group, defended the territorial integrity of Lebanon and was fighting against ISIS. In fact, even the mainstream Western media acknowledged that the Lebanese army was indirectly collaborating with Hezbollah in order to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Here's a 2017 report in Reuters. Lebanese army Hezbollah announced offensives against Islamic State on Syrian border. Now, officially, the Lebanese army claimed they were not collaborating with Hezbollah because the Lebanese army has received support from the US and Western governments, and they don't want to be affiliated with Hezbollah formally. But we all know that unofficially, the Lebanese army was collaborating with Hezbollah against ISIS. And they were also unofficially collaborating with the Syrian army against ISIS. And meanwhile, while Hezbollah was fighting ISIS, do you know where ISIS fascists were getting their weapons from? The United States and its allies.
I've been saying this.
Here's a report from CNN in 2015. It cites a report done by Amnesty
Remember how
International.
mad people got when I pointed this out?
It's titled Amnesty Report, ISIS Armed with U.S. Weapons. And another report by a UK-based organization called Conflict Armament Research disclosed in 2017 that once again, ISIS's weapons largely came from the United States and Saudi Arabia. And as Al Jazeera reported, Al Jazeera is Qatari state media, and actually Qatar was also supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria, which is ironic. But as this Al Jazeera report noted, arms used by ISIS or ISIL in battle were supplied by the US and Saudi Arabia to Syrian opposition fighters. In 2015, Reuters published an article quoting the US military, which admitted that US-trained so-called rebels in Syria, the so-called moderate rebels, gave their US weapons and military equipment to Jabhat al-Nusra, which was Syria's Al-Qaeda affiliate, which at that time was the world's largest Al-Qaeda affiliate. So I really need to emphasize this point. The US military admitted the so-called moderate rebels that they armed in Syria were giving weapons to Al-Qaeda. So let's summarize what happened here. Hezbollah and its allies like Iran and the Syrian government were forming coalitions with Christians and minority groups in Lebanon and in Syria to protect themselves against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, whereas ISIS and Al-Qaeda were getting weapons from the US and the Gulf monarchies as they tried to carry out genocide against Shia Muslims and Christians and Druze and other religious and ethnic minorities. So again, Hezbollah fought against ISIS rebels, while ISIS was getting US weapons, but we're supposed to believe that Hezbollah is a so-called terrorist organization. So now, where does Israel fit in all of this? Well, in 2019, the chief of the Israeli military, the IDF, admitted that for years, Israel had been providing weapons and support to the so-called rebels in Syria that were allied with ISIS and Al-Qaeda as they were fighting the Syrian government and its allies, Iran and Hezbollah. In fact, it gets even worse. The mainstream Israeli newspaper, the Jerusalem Post, reported in 2015, I'm reading the headline, quote, report, Israel treating Al-Qaeda fighters wounded in the Syria civil war. This article admitted that extremist Salafi jihadist fascists from Syria, from Al-Qaeda, the Al-Qaeda affiliate, which is Jabhat al-Nusra, when they were wounded, they were being treated by Israel. Israel was literally aiding Al-Qaeda in Syria. And that's not all. ISIS one time accidentally attacked Israel. And what happened? Well, I'm reading here an article from 2017 in the Times of Israel. It says, ex-defense minister says ISIS apologized to Israel. I'm just going to read the opening paragraph of this article in the mainstream Israeli media outlet, the Times of Israel. Quote, former defense minister Moshe Yaalon on Saturday said the Islamic State terrorist group in the Syrian Golan Heights apologized for attacking an Israeli unit. There was one case recently where Daesh opened fire and apologized, Yaalon said, using the terror group's Arabic nickname, end quote. So I really need to stress this once again. Hezbollah, which Western governments claims is supposedly a terrorist organization, saved Christians and Shia Muslims from genocide that was being carried out by ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which were getting weapons from the US and its Gulf allies and being treated in hospitals by Israel. And then Israel got an apology when ISIS accidentally attacked Israel. I mean, this really speaks for itself.
Yes, it does.
When you understand these facts, which have all been reported in mainstream media outlets, I'm not quoting any fringe media outlet here. These are mainstream media outlets in the US and Israel. They are acknowledging that the so-called terrorist organization Hezbollah was fighting against the actual terrorists, and Hezbollah defended not only minority groups,
Catalepsy, like I know he never laughs, but it's like you have to laugh at how absurd it is. this like wielding this weaponization of the whole terror concept of terrorism and wielding it to describe groups like Hezbollah by the largest exporter of terrorism that exists in the world. Like, it's just fucking insane. You have to laugh because it's of how brazen and absurd it is.
Defended Lebanon and its territorial integrity and sovereignty. In fact, in 2020, Reuters reported that Hezbollah is the most powerful group in Lebanon, period. Of course, there's also the Hezbollah political party, which is just one of the political parties in the parliament, which is in the ruling coalition. But we're talking about the Hezbollah armed wing. This is not just a small paramilitary group. In fact, some analysts say that Hezbollah is more powerful than the Lebanese armed forces. That is to say that it is because of Hezbollah that Lebanon still exists in its current form, with its territorial integrity. If it were not for Hezbollah leading the resistance, Israel would have colonized the southern part of Lebanon, which it militarily occupied for 18 years. If it were not for Hezbollah, ISIS and Al-Qaeda may have taken over Lebanon. So Hezbollah and the Syrian government and Iran and also resistance groups in Iraq, they were responsible for defeating ISIS and defending their country's territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Western exported terrorism and the war on terror existing simultaneously is a historical level joke. And you know who benefited from that greatly are the fucking weapons contractors, who are the ones that always come out ahead. It's the whole purpose for the United States to even exist, is just to funnel money to these people. Israel now saying Lebanon, not a real country, same old playbook. And as I was saying earlier, D-Mesh, like Israel calling other countries not real is pretty incredible in and of itself. But yeah, using all the exact same rhetoric, not a real country, it's all Hezbollah. You got all these civilians having Hezbollah missiles and weapons in their homes. Like, it's just talking about Lebanon the exact same way they've been talking about Palestine for the last, I don't want to say the last year because it's been the last several decades, but that's really alarming though, isn't it? It's really alarming. And it's like, you got to wonder how much this is just going to be allowed to continue. And evidently there's really nothing that they can do to escalate this that will cause some kind of pushback from the US government, which could stop this at any time.
Their governments from being overthrown by ISIS and Al-Qaeda, whereas the West was basically cheering them on as they try to take over huge swaths of West Asia. Now, on that note, I'm going to conclude. I wanted to provide some more context for...
That was a great video from Ben Norton. Calling them not a real country when my dad is older than the state of Israel. Yeah, I mean, Israel is a fake country backed by other fake countries such as Canada. Canada also not a real country. It's completely made up. It's fiction. Wrong. This one was invented by a writer, etc. I am going to have to get going soon, folks. I got to go pick up my kid from school pretty soon. Like I said, I had some car problems last night and I was supposed to get him and I couldn't, and it was very upsetting. So I want to make sure that I'm on time for that today. So I do have to get going. We made it up. If you can, folks, please subscribe to the program. If you've enjoyed like what you've seen, if you like the dialogue and the analysis and the conversation and that you enjoy this program, I've got 9 subs to go to get to the sub goal. If you can, please subscribe and support the work that I do on here. The new car. Yeah, I had a whole fiasco yesterday, SV Harkin. It's not new. I mean, it's 10 years old. It's a new used car.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk.
And I was driving back from Toronto last night and the starter died.
Sankara.
The starter died in Whitby, Ontario. I went and got gas and then tried to start the car to drive back to Montreal and could not drive the car. But I did get it fixed. It should be fixed now, in theory. But it was not great. It was not a great situation.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Garden Variety Cat Lady, thanks for the gifted sub. The 8-month resub. Thank you, Garden Variety Cat Lady. Thank you,
can
Brandon,
count
for
on
gifting
me.
a sub.
You're
I
gonna have good
appreciate
old
that.
Rob to,
Thank you,
talk you
Squatch,
through
for
all
5
this.
gifted subs.
Good
That's
luck
very,
with the
very
car.
kind of you. Thank you, Squatch Drew, for all the support over the years. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for that. And thank you, Vec Zero, as well, for 3 months. 3 months of tier 1 from Vec Zero as well. Very cool. Very much appreciated. Thanks so much for supporting this program, everybody. We got 1 sub to go. Is there going to be a hero that's going to come through with 1 sub? I'm trying to get back on track now. I'm trying to do this show regularly again. I'm not always in Montreal lately. I've been spending a lot of time in Toronto. I'm trying to take steps to ensure that I can do the stream even when I am there.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old
And look at that.
Rob
Pizza
to,
Kata,
talk
thank you
through
for
all
the
this.
gifted sub. We made it to the sub goal. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in and for supporting this show. It means a lot, and I appreciate it a whole lot. Thank you. Toronto fan meet. Well, St. Lotus, I'm hosting a panel at a conference in Toronto in November, which I will be able to reveal the details of pretty soon. It's going to be a really cool conference. It's going to be a really cool panel. I will be able to talk more about that soon. I will let everyone know when that is. If you are in Toronto, please come out to that. If you want to hang out, I would be happy to meet anyone that's part of this community that wants to say hi. I would be thrilled to be able to do that. And I will give you more info about this conference and this panel that I'm hosting in Toronto in a couple of weeks. Investing in one of those $100 air compressor and portable battery jump starter to throw in my car has been one of the best personal investments ever to be made. I definitely will do that, Dr. Maggot. This was not a battery issue. It was a starter issue, but it's definitely something that I know I need to have. Is Toronto far from Texas? No, it's not that far. I have driven from Toronto to Texas before, little baby beef. In 2008, I drove from Toronto to Austin, Texas, which was a very long drive. It was fun, but it was a very long drive. It was like 3 days. Rob is my favorite streamer from US back to Canada. Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. And once again, I appreciate everyone for tuning in and supporting the show. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much. I'm in Fort Worth, so like minus 3 hours should be quick. Should be no problem, little baby beef. I look forward to seeing you there. There's no better time than the present to visit beautiful Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Better place than here. What better time than now? Imagine if we had continental high to near high speed trains. That would be nice, wouldn't it? That'd be nice to have that. Maybe one day when we finally, the West finally reaches the point of collapse, when we can start making deals with China and join the Belt and Road Initiative, maybe then we can finally get some high-speed rail built and it won't be that big of a deal to travel these vast distances. And we can do so quickly and economically. One of these days. Anyway, folks, I'll be back tomorrow, same time at noon. Once again, I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the show. Really, really trying to get back on track here, which I've been saying for weeks. But I will be back tomorrow. Hopefully be back to doing the show mostly full-time from now on. Which I've said before. This time, though, it's true. This time, though, I mean it. Okay? This time I mean it. So thanks again, chat. Okay? I'm going to see you soon. I'll see you tomorrow. We got big guests coming up. Peace out.